Hey guys, tonight, we step into a dim, smoky hut on the edge of a muddy medieval village where the scent of garlic rotting straw and despair cling to your clothes like mildew. You're not a farmer. You're not a knight. Nope, you're the one everyone dreads but absolutely needs. You're the medieval dentist, or rather the closest thing to one. You wake up on your flea-infested straw mattress with a familiar pounding in your jaw. Your own molar is inflamed, pulsating like a cursed drum, but you don't have time to feel sorry for yourself. There's a line forming outside your door, moaning peasants, half-toothless monks, and even a chicken under someone's arm for barter. Let's be real, you probably won't survive this, at least not with your hearing sanity or fingers fully intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rise, rubbing your face and feeling the sharp sting of an emerging canker sore. Great. You grope for your wooden cup and swish yesterday's ale to loosen whatever crusted to your tongue overnight. Dental hygiene isn't exactly a thing you know that better than anyone. You spit into a corner and shuffle to the tools, praying nothing rusted further overnight. First up is your first client of the day, a baker with cheeks puffed like an overproofed loaf. He winces, opens his mouth, and reveals a blackened tooth that smells like it's halfway to the afterlife. You poke at it with your iron pick, basically just a bent nail, and he howls so loud a crow drops dead outside. You nod solemnly. Needs pulling. He doesn't argue. People in this century would rather lose a tooth than live with it another hour. Honestly, you get it. But here's the thing. There's no anesthesia. No numbing gel. Not even a popsicle afterward. Just a gulp of warm ale and a piece of wood to bite down on. Historians still argue whether some medieval practitioners used opium or herbal concoctions for pain. You're working with nothing but grit and guesswork. And a chisel that hasn't been washed since the last crusade. You brace his head between your knees. Yes, this is standard practice, and reach for your most trustworthy pair of iron forceps. They're heavy, dull, and clunky. Think garden shears meet meat hook. You wedge them around the bad tooth twist like you're cranking open a stubborn jar, and crack. You got it. Mostly. The root might still be in there, but you'll deal with that later. Or not. Your second patient is worse. A boy barely 12 who hasn't been able to eat in days. His gums are bleeding, his breath smells like old turnips, and his parents look desperate. You offer to cauterize. They nod. And here comes the part where you use fire. Actual fire. You heat a metal rod in the coals and apply it straight to the infection. The sizzle is immediate. So is the screaming. Medieval dentistry is part science, part guesswork, and 98% pain. There are no x-rays, no dental chairs, no cute little sinks to spit into. You spit out the window like everyone else. You also don't wear gloves, or change your clothes, or wash your hands. At best, you wipe them on your tunic between patients. Quirky fact, some people believe toothaches are caused by tiny worms living in your teeth. Tooth worms. That's a real theory. There are even little charms to coax them out. Historians still debate whether practitioners like you truly believed in those creatures, or just used the myth to comfort terrified villagers. Mid-morning, someone offers you a dead pheasant in exchange for an emergency extraction. You take it. You haven't had meat in a week, and your jaw's killing you anyway. A monk passes by and gives you a sideways glance. Dentists are often viewed with suspicion. Too much blood. Too much screaming. People think you're half healer, half demon. But when their own teeth start to rot, they remember where to find you. You take a break around noon, sipping the same stale ale and chewing on a hunk of brown bread so hard it might be contributing to your own dental demise. Your bad molar pulses again. You poke at it with a finger and immediately regret it. But there's still half a village outside. No one else is pulling teeth today, just you. You reach for your tools and wince not from your aching tooth this time, but from the sheer horror of what you're holding. Your so-called dental instruments are more like props from a medieval torture museum. You've got a pair of iron tongs so thick they could pull nails from a castle door, a rusted chisel you sharpen against a brick wall, and a hammer that may or may not have been used last week to shoe a horse. And yet this is your whole setup. No sleek, sterilized steel. No rolling tray with nice compartments. Just a stained wooden box and a hunk of animal fat to keep the rust somewhat in check. You pull out the pelican. No, not a bird. A twisted metal contraption with a curved beak-like end used to extract teeth with the grace of a medieval crowbar. Historians still argue whether the pelican improved outcomes or just broke more jaws. You personally vote for the latter. You've seen it snap a man's molar in two and leave the root so deep you swear it started growing again. Today's client is a farmer with a canine tooth sticking out like it's trying to escape on its own. He's already drunk half a flask of barley beer, and his wife is holding his arms because he kicked you the last time you tried to touch his mouth. You brace him against the wall, wedge the pelican into place, and crank it like you're tuning a medieval lute that hates you. He screams, loud. Your left ear starts ringing, but finally pop. You get the whole tooth. You hold it up for him to see, still steaming slightly. He faints. You don't even flinch anymore. You drag him to the corner and toss a rag on his face. Next, a merchant comes in, clutching his cheek. Gold Ring's fancy hat clearly thinks he's above this. Until he sits down, and you show him the tools. That shuts him up. You give him a choice, the chisel or the key. The dental key is a newer instrument, and it works kind of like a bottle opener for your face. Clamp it on twist, and pray. He goes for the key. You regret it instantly. The key slip smashes his gums, and he starts bleeding like a pig at Lent. You grab a handful of cobwebs from the ceiling. Yes, actual cobwebs, and shove them into his mouth. Quirky as it sounds, cobwebs were believed to have antiseptic properties. Some people say they even work. Others say you're just stuffing old spider homes into a guy's head. Either way, the bleeding slows. Mostly. Now your hands are sticky. Again. You wipe them on your apron, which hasn't been washed since the last good harvest, and reach for a sliver of wood to chew on. Not for him, for you. It helps distract from the ever-growing throb in your own jaw. You think the infection might be spreading. But who's going to treat you? There's a knock at the door, an urgent one. A young girl, barely 10, holding her face and crying. You feel your stomach twist. You hate working on kids. Their mouths are tiny, their tolerance lower, and the parents always watch you like hawks. She climbs onto the stool, and you ask her to open wide. What you see makes your breath catch. Her gums are blackened. Not just one tooth, all of them. This is rot, bad and deep. And you know you can't fix it. You tell the mother gently. She looks crushed, but nods. People expect you to be honest, even if honesty sounds like your daughter's teeth are turning into ash, and there's nothing I can do. You offer some sage to chew on, mostly placebo, and tell them to come back if the pain gets worse. Which it will. It always does. And yet, despite all this, you still have to keep going. The tools aren't going to clean themselves, though. Clean is really a generous word here. You dunk them in a bucket of stale wine, give them a quick scrub with straw, and call it good. The vinegar fumes sting your eyes, but they also cover the scent of blood, sweat, and regret. As the day goes on, your hands ache. Your back feels like it's aging a decade per hour. You start mixing up tools. You almost use your hammer to knock in a tooth instead of pulling it. Close call, but you can't stop. There's always someone knocking, always someone crying, always someone with a mouthful of rot who thinks you have the answer. You don't. You only have tongs. Mid-afternoon, and the hut smells like metal sweat and damp wool. Your knees crack as you squat down to pick up a dropped pair of forceps you've been hunched over open-mouthed since sunrise, and you're pretty sure your spine is one tug away from early retirement. A new patient sits waiting, clutching his jaw with one hand and a wineskin with the other. No one ever shows up sober. That's because in your world there's no such thing as pain relief, at least not the kind that works before you pass out, or start seeing visions of Saint Apollonia dancing. The man slurs something about a molar that hates him. You nod. They always do. You hand him the wineskin again. Drink more, you say. He does. Ale, beer, cider, whatever people can ferment, they bring it to dull the pain. But unless he drinks himself unconscious, it's not going to do much. Historians still argue whether some medieval practitioners used mandrake root poppy extracts, or even belladonna as anesthetics. The truth. Maybe a few monks in well-funded monasteries had the good stuff. You, on the other hand, have ale and a dirty cloth to bite down on. The man sways as you position the pelican again. He grunts. You brace, twist, crack. Another tooth hits the bucket. He vomits on your floor. Again. You use your foot to push some straw over it and motion to the next person. Just another day at the... well, you can't really call it a clinic. More like a glorified woodshed with a chair and a blood-stained towel. You pause just long enough to press your hand to your own jaw again. The throb is worse now. You can't remember the last time you ate anything harder than stewed lentils. You tried chewing dried apple yesterday and nearly cried. You consider pulling your own tooth out just to get it over with. But you've seen enough failed self-extractions to know better. You're not ready to join the Gaps and Gums Club just yet. Your next patient is a blacksmith. His massive arms like barrels soot still streaking his forehead. He refuses the ale and insists, just get it over with. You appreciate the bravado until he nearly crushes your wrist in reflex when you dig into his back molar. You have to yell at his apprentice to pin him down. 4 seconds of twisting and 1 sickening pop, and the job's done. Blood pours out. You stuff the wound with moss. Yes, moss. Oak moss is your go-to for clotting. It works surprisingly well, though some think it's because fairies blessed it. You don't care who blessed it, as long as it stops the bleeding. He leaves without a word. You respect that. You add his tooth to the bucket, which is starting to look like a goblet, filled with tiny yellowed gravestones. There's a superstition that you should bury the extracted teeth far from home, or risk toothaches returning in the afterlife. You've never had time for that. They all end up in the bucket. One guy tried to buy them back once to make a necklace. You're still not sure if he was serious. Next, a priest. Always the worst patients. He wants a miracle, not molar removal. He tells you the pain is punishment for gluttony. You tell him it's probably just decay and too much candied fig. He doesn't laugh. You pry open his mouth and see a cavity so deep you half expect to hear echoes. You try to tell him the tooth can be saved, maybe packed with soot and honey like the monks in Wales do, but he insists on removal. Fine. The tooth comes out clean, but his pride does not. He storms out muttering something about the devil in my gums. You're left wondering if you just gave Satan another address to forward mail to. By now, your hands are shaking. You spill a ladle of water while rinsing your tools and cut your thumb on the chisel. You suck the blood absent-mindedly. You can taste rust. You've been around metal so long, your body might actually be part forge by now. The shadows grow longer outside. A child cries nearby, someone new in line. You don't have time to rest. Your back aches, your jaw is on fire, and the bucket's nearly full. And yet the day isn't done. By now the sun is dragging its lazy limbs toward the horizon, and you've got the 1,000-yard stare of someone who's heard too many people scream into a rag. But no one in town really cares what kind of day you're having, because you're not just the local dentist, you're the barber, the bloodletter, and on Tuesdays, the guy who resets broken fingers and trims goat hooves. You change aprons, if you can call slapping a slightly less bloody tunic over your current one changing, and grab your knife kit. It's not much a razor, a bowl, a cauterizing iron, and a stick you use to realign noses. A merchant's son has arrived for a beard trim. You stare at the infected pustule under his chin, and mentally prepare to switch into barber-surgeon mode. While shaving, you accidentally nick him hard not to, when your razor's duller than a parish sermon, and blood seeps out faster than expected. He pales. You smile politely and hand him a bowl, then get your leech jar. Time for a little balancing of the humors. You open the jar and coax out 3 fat leeches which squirm happily onto the boy's neck. His face twists in terror. You tell him this will cure the infection, though between you and me, it's about 30% treatment and 70% medieval placebo. Historians still argue whether bloodletting actually helped or just shortened the patient's misery. Either way, people expect you to do it. So you do. He leaves a little dizzy, a little paler, and a lot less cocky than when he came in. Next up, bone setting. Because of course, someone fell off their horse again. A shepherd limps in, clutching his arm. His forearm's bent like an old tree branch, and he's clearly been walking on it for a day already. You groan, set down your cup of broth, more beer than broth, honestly, and motion him over. You don't have splints. Not proper ones. You use wooden slats from a barrel and whatever cloth you can rip from a sack. You grit your teeth, grab his wrist, and in one sharp motion, snap the bone back in place. He howls. You stuff a dirty cloth in his mouth and wrap the arm tight. Will it heal straight? Probably not. But it won't dangle like a boiled eel anymore. In between patients, you finally take a bite of something cold, turnip stew. It tastes like sadness and missed opportunities. Your own tooth is aching again, worse than before. You press your fingers to the swelling on your jaw. You know the signs. It's abscessing. Pus is likely building beneath the gum line. You need to lance it, but you don't trust anyone else's hands. Maybe tomorrow you'll get drunk enough to try. Then someone brings in a baby goat. You stare. The farmer insists you're the only one clever with little mouths. He wants you to look at its teeth. You've reached the part of your day where you no longer question anything. You inspect the goat. 2 loose teeth. You nudge one free with a spoon and give the farmer a nod. He gives you a hunk of cheese as payment. Not terrible. You toss it on your shelf next to the coins, the goose feathers and the small silver charm a grateful widow once gave you after you yanked 3 teeth and saved her from what she called the screaming jaw spirits. It's not glamorous. It's not even respectable by some standards. But you're a crucial fixture in town, a walking toolbox of pain grit and just enough questionable wisdom to keep people coming back. No one trusts you, but they need you. By sunset, your hut is quieter, the line outside finally dwindled. You sit down, your muscles trembling. You dig under your fingernails with a sliver of bone. You think it came from someone's mouth. You don't ask. One last knock. You stand and open the door. A young woman with her hair in braids holding a cloth to her cheek. "Please," she whispers. "I can't eat." You step aside, gesture to the stool, and pick up your forceps again. Dentist, barber, bloodletter, bone setter, animal tooth wrangler. The day's not over yet. You don't even flinch when the young woman opens her mouth, and you spot a molar that looks more fungus than tooth. It's greenish-gray, cracked, and leaking something that probably violates natural law. You nod slowly, trying not to look horrified. She's clearly been dealing with this for a while, long enough to pray the pain would go away on its own. It never does. She grips the edge of the stool, tears already welling as you reach for your tools. You try to distract her with a calming tone. "Could be worse," you mumble. "Could be a back tooth." It is a back tooth, of course. But she doesn't know that, and you're not in the mood to ruin what little hope she's got. You wrap a strip of linen around the tool's handle for extra grip. Your palms are still slick with sweat, and God knows what. As you brace her head and position the pelican, you can't help but remember what your old master once said. It's not the pulling that breaks them, it's the waiting. Historians still argue whether medieval patients truly believed in the toothworm theory, or if it was just a comforting story passed along through generations. Supposedly, a wriggling creature burrowed into your teeth and nested there, causing the agony. You don't believe in worms. You believe in rot and sugar, and people who chew too many candied almonds. You extract the molar. She screams claws, your sleeve nearly kicks the stool over, but it's out. She spits blood into the corner like it's routine. You pack the wound with salt-dusted linen and send her home with a warning not to rinse with anything stronger than water. She asks what else she can do for the pain. You suggest a strong prayer and a stronger wine. You sit again, and for the first time all day, you allow yourself to stare at your own reflection in a scrap of burnished metal hanging near the door. You look 50. You're 32. Your teeth are yellow chipped, and that one molar, the one that's been throbbing, looks suspiciously black around the edge. You reach for your own cheek, pressing lightly. Yep, it's swelling. You rifle through your own drawer of treatments. Honey and soot paste, crushed garlic and goose fat. None of it will cure you, but they might buy you a few more nights of sleep. Let's talk theories. In some parts of Europe, people believed toothaches could be cured by placing a dead mouse next to the bad tooth. Yes, a mouse. Some said it worked best if the mouse had been blessed by a priest. Others swore by touching a tooth to the hanging corpse of a criminal transfer the pain to the dead. You've tried neither, but you're not ruling anything out. Today, you try the garlic. You chew it slowly. It burns like betrayal and keeps the flies away for a bit. You spit it out and chase it with a mouthful of sour ale. It's not helping. You press your fingers into your temple and consider pulling the thing yourself, but not yet. You look around the room. Blood-stained rags in a corner. A bucket of extracted teeth, each one a tiny grim monument to pain endured. You remember the old woman who brought you those 3 gold coins for saving her life last winter. She'd had a jaw infection so bad, she couldn't speak. You lanced the abscess with your smallest blade, drained the pus into a cracked bowl, and packed the wound with crushed cloves. She kissed your hand afterward. You didn't wash it for a week. There's a knock again. Of course there is. This time, it's a local healer midwife by trade, here to trade gossip and sage, in exchange for you checking her cracked molar. You examine it while she tells you about the Baron's son, who supposedly fainted during a fingernail trim. She laughs like a cackling bell. Her tooth is fine. Just scared. As she leaves, she hands you a small satchel powdered yarrow root. Put this on your sore spot, she says. It won't help much, but it'll taste less awful than garlic. She winks. Or mouse. You almost laugh. Almost. The wind howls outside, bringing with it the scent of hearth smoke and wet earth. Evening is crawling in now, and you can see the torches being lit across the village. You close the door. You sit in your chair. You lean your head back and rest your eyes. The tooth still throbs. Night drips slowly into the room like ink, and the only light left is the flickering orange of the hearth. The smoke curls upward, lazily, almost mockingly, as if it knows you won't sleep. Not with your jaw this swollen. Not with your legs still twitching from a day of wrestling grown men and yanking their dental demons. You think about pulling your own tooth again. It's become a recurring thought, like a bad melody you can't shake. You even lay out the tools. You pick up the forceps and test their grip, hovering them near your mouth, in front of the polished scrap of metal you call a mirror. You catch your own reflection, blood-stained apron, crooked smile, the faint smear of someone else's spit on your cheek. You put the tool down. Not tonight. A knock. Again. You nearly scream. You hobble to the door and open it, expecting another frantic parent or stoic farmer. Instead, it's the town baker holding a bundle wrapped in linen. His wife is with him, her face pale and eyes damp. You invite them in without a word. They unwrap the bundle. A child, maybe 6, maybe 7. He's asleep or unconscious or both. His cheeks are swollen, and his lips are cracked from breathing through his mouth for days. You know the look. You've seen it too many times. The infection is deep. He moans softly as you gently lift his head. The back of his jaw is hot to the touch. His breath smells like curdled milk and rot. You glance at the parents who can barely meet your eyes. Here's the thing. They never tell you about being a medieval dentist. You're not just yanking teeth. Sometimes you're deciding whether someone lives through the night. You stoke the fire, pour your strongest ale into a cloth, and soak it. You press it to the boy's lips. He grimaces and coughs, but swallows. You prepare your knife. The abscess will have to be drained and fast. You've done this maybe 3 times before. One of those patients lived. One didn't. One, you're not sure. Historians still argue whether medieval dental procedures were more about survival or ritual. In truth, it's both. You murmur a blessing not because you're religious, but because it helps people think you know what you're doing. You lay the boy down, wrap a belt around his tiny arms, and brace his head. You slice. Pus spurts out, thick and yellow-green, running down his cheek. The smell hits you like a slap. The boy screams, then stills. You press clean cloths to the wound, packing it with powdered myrrh and crushed mint. Old apothecary tricks. Will it help, maybe? Maybe not. The mother thanks you. You give her some dried sage and instructions to keep the wound clean. She nods through tears. The father drops a silver penny into your hand. That's 3 weeks' wages. You tuck it into your pocket without comment. They leave. You cleans up. You burn the bloody rags in the hearth. You wash your hands with cold rainwater collected in a cracked basin. You wonder if the boy will live. You go back to your stool. You drink the last of your ale. You chew on the soft leather of your belt, trying to distract yourself from your tooth. It's not working. Quirky fact, some medieval folks believed tooth pain could be caused by sin. You wonder what you could have possibly done wrong. Overcharged for one extraction, used a pig bristle instead of a clean cloth. Forgotten to bury the bucket of teeth again. The bucket is still there, by the way. You can't bring yourself to look at it. There must be over 100 teeth in it now, rotten, cracked, broken, yanked in terror. You think about dumping them into the river, but then what? The fish don't deserve that kind of curse. You hear a distant cough outside. Someone camping nearby, maybe. Or maybe another patient deciding whether to knock. You hope they don't, just for tonight. You lie down on your cot. You press your tongue against the sore tooth, and it pulses angrily in return. You think not, for the first time, about how no one's coming to help you when this gets worse. You're the dentist. There's no dentist for the dentist. The morning creaks in slowly, and your back reminds you of everything you did yesterday. Every spine-twisting reach, every arm-bracing tug, every wince someone else let out, while you tried not to. The fire's gone out, leaving your hut chilly, and your jaw has swollen into something that makes talking feel like chewing glass. You spit a thick strand of saliva tinged with blood into the corner and grimace. Time to get up. Time to be the village hero again. You shuffle to your tools. Most are stained brown-black now. No one inspects them, not for cleanliness, not for accuracy, not for divine approval. You're not a man of God. You're just the man who holds the pliers. You think about the bucket again. You think about the boy from last night. Is he alive? Did he sleep? Did the pus return like a vengeful ghost in the night? No one tells you. No one needs to. You're the stopgap between pain and worse pain, not some miracle worker. Outside, the rooster crows. You hate that rooster. You hate that it gets to crow with a full set of beak teeth. Not real teeth, of course, but still the irony stings. Today starts with something new. A nobleman's courier at your door. Fancy cloak, clean fingernails, absolutely no idea what he's walked into. He has a scroll in hand and a worried look on his face. The local baron requests your services. Urgently. You sigh and begin packing your travel kit. Your mobile setup includes forceps wrapped in old linen, a chisel, a small blade, and a flask of something flammable that serves as both disinfectant and courage. You toss in some cobwebs, dried sage, and one reasonably clean cloth. That'll have to do. You follow the courier to the manor. Inside, everything smells better, but feels worse. Wood polished to gleam servants, whispering a fire that doesn't crackle with soot. You're taken to a chamber where the baron himself is lying on a bed, with a swollen jaw that could rival a wine barrel. He waves everyone away, but you. You examine him carefully. Lower molar, angry red. He tries to hide his fear behind a sneer. You've seen it before. You live on the fear behind sneers. You offer him ale. He declines. Get on with it, he growls. So you do. Your fingers are steady. You brace his head against the velvet headboard. Definitely not standard practice, and twist the forceps deep into his jaw. The sound it makes isn't human. Something between a crunch and a wet snap. He grunts, eyes wide. He's definitely going to remember this. You stuff his mouth with moss and give a polite nod. He tries to thank you with his eyes. His mouth is otherwise occupied with trauma and linen. He gives you a coin pouch, heavy, likely more than you earn in 6 months. You thank him with your eyes, too. Back at home, you add the pouch to your shelf. Next to the charm, the goose feather, the tooth with the gold inlay you couldn't bring yourself to throw away. Then with aching fingers, you try something radical. You sit. No one's knocking for now. You soak your own cloth in that flammable mystery spirit and press it to your cheek. The sting makes your toes curl. But there's relief. Tiny, glorious relief. You consider lancing the thing yourself. You hold your knife to the fire. Watch the blade glow orange. Then you stop. You hear footsteps outside. You wait. They pass. You breathe again. You sit back, close your eyes, and allow yourself the fantasy just for a minute that someone else could hold the pliers for you. That you could lie back, clutch the rag between your teeth, and trust someone else to know what they're doing. Historians still argue whether medieval practitioners were trusted members of the community or tolerated out of sheer necessity. You don't argue. You know. You're not trusted. You're tolerated. You're needed. And you're so tired. Night falls again, quiet and moonless. The fire in your hearth is down to its last flickers, and every movement you make sends aches rippling up and down your limbs. You sit hunched in your stool, staring at your tools, still warm from use, still faintly stained with the day's miseries. The room smells of clove smoke, blood, boiled herbs, and something metallic you've long since stopped trying to identify. You know what's coming next. You've run out of excuses. The swelling in your cheek is worse. You feel feverish now. Your skin itches, your fingers tremble, and your entire mouth pulses in sync with your heartbeat, like the tooth is trying to claw its way out on its own. So tonight it's you. You stoke the fire until the coals are bright and ready. You light a stub of tallow candle. You clean your blade twice. Then you tie a rag between your teeth and pour some of that harsh spirit down your throat. Not enough to pass out, just enough to blur the edges. You lean toward the mirror, your poor excuse for one, and open your mouth wide. You find the problem tooth. You already knew which one it was, but seeing it up close, inflamed and oozing just beneath the gum, makes your breath hitch. You ready your smallest knife and press it gently then firmly into the swollen flesh. The pain is blinding. Tears spill from your eyes uninvited. You grit your teeth well-tooth and push deeper. There's a pop, then a rush. The pressure releases in an instant as thick pus and blood run down your chin. You gag, cough, spit into the fire. The pain spikes, then suddenly lessens. Not gone, not healed, but less. You wipe your face lightheaded, but relieved. You lean back, exhaling through your nose like you've just outrun a nightmare. You did it. You did what no one else in the village could do. You take a moment to breathe. Deep, slow. Then comes the knock. Of course, it's an old man wrapped in a patchy cloak, his face half-shadowed. "Please," he says, lifting his chin. "I can't sleep. There's something in my teeth that won't stop burning." And because you're you, because you can't say no, you open the door wider and wave him in. You wipe your blade on your apron. You gesture to the stool. He sits. You reach for your forceps. And so the wheel turns again. You work until the candle burns low. One last extraction. One more story added to the quiet horror of your hut. Another tiny trophy for the bucket. By the time you're alone again, it's nearly morning. The sky outside is lightening to the faintest gray. The pain in your jaw is now a dull hum instead of a screaming alarm. You pour the rest of your drink into your cup. You sip slowly. You take one last glance at your tools, the bucket of teeth, the crusted rags, the fire still spitting the ghost of pus from earlier, and you whisper something. Not a prayer, not really. Just a little vow to yourself. Tomorrow I'll rest. You won't, of course, but it's nice to imagine. The fire crackles low now, casting soft shadows against the uneven walls of your little hut. The pain in your jaw fades into something manageable, something you can ignore, at least for tonight. The smell of sage still lingers faintly, masking the harsher scents that have clung to your clothes and your hands for days. Outside, the village is quiet. No more knocks, no more cries of pain, Just the whisper of wind weaving through shutters, the occasional creak of old wood settling into sleep. You close your eyes, breath slowing. Your tools rest beside you, finally still. Even the bucket of teeth seems subdued under the dim glow of morning's first light. You lean back, letting your head tilt against the wall, and for just a moment everything softens. Everything stills. You made it through another day. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a world of clashing bronze swords, smoke-choked battlefields, and honor earned through blood, except your guts have other plans. Because tonight you're not just a warrior. You're a warrior with diarrhea. You wake before dawn in your cramped mud brick hut. The campfire outside is already sputtering with morning embers, and your comrades grunt and stretch like oxen getting ready to haul something heavy. Which in your case is your own angry intestines. The stew from last night, lukewarm, suspiciously shiny, and made from what may have once been rabbit, tastes fine, going down. It's what happens after that should have sent up a red flag. But food is food, and you've learned not to ask questions. Oh, and the goat milk. Left out all night. A little sour, a little chunky. You drank it anyway. You need energy after all. Today's a battle day, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're supposed to feel adrenaline, that famous warrior's fire. What you feel instead is a deep gurgling doom spiraling through your abdomen. You crouch by the bush line before camp muster, hoping no one notices. But someone always does. Your closest friend gives you a look. Again he mouths. You nod. You don't want to talk. Talking shakes your stomach. The thing about diarrhea in the Bronze Age, there's no privacy, no toilet paper, no Imodium. Just Reed's panic and the terrifying sound of your general shouting orders while you're still squatting behind a tree praying to the storm god for just 10 more minutes. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age armies had dedicated latrine zones on campaign. Some say yes, based on cesspit remains near barracks. Others point out that sanitation was so poor that the entire camp probably just used the nearest bush. Either way, it's not helpful right now. The worst part. You know what's coming. You've felt this before. It starts small, just a twinge. Then the cramps. Then the pressure. And then, if you're really unlucky, the cold sweat that breaks across your brow while you're halfway through lacing your sandals. You chew a sliver of dried fig to settle your stomach. A bad idea. It's basically a digestive accelerant. But it tastes better than goat milk. And besides, someone just yelled shields up, so you're officially out of time. Quirky fact, in some Bronze Age regions, dried cow dung was used to settle the humors. Burn it, breathe it, smear it. All depending on who your healer was. Some even brewed it into tea. You wonder if that's better or worse than the taste already crawling up your throat. You stand. Your body protests. But you adjust your gear shield spear and leather armor and try to look battle-ready. Except your stomach lets out a noise that's somewhere between a whimper and a wet trumpet. The guy next to you turns his head. You pretend it came from the goats. And then the horn blows. Battle is near. You start walking, lining up in formation, feeling the heat rise with the morning on, and your own internal meltdown. You have a long day ahead, one filled with marching, stabbing, screaming, and praying above all that your bowels don't betray you when the arrows start flying. But let's be real. They definitely will. You march. Because what else can't you do? The horn's blown. Your commander is pacing like a man with something to prove. And you? Well, you're somewhere between a soldier and a walking bladder of doom. Each step squishes faintly inside your gut, like your insides are chewing gum in a leather pouch. You clutch your spear a little tighter to distract yourself. The army's on the move. Sandals slap against the hard-packed earth in a staccato rhythm that's almost hypnotic. The problem is there are no breaks. No one pulls the line over to go behind a tree. You walk until your legs shake, then keep walking. If you're lucky, there's a 10-minute water pause, shared cup, mind you, before the march continues. But if you have business, you're expected to deal with it discreetly. Have you ever tried being discreet in a tightly packed column of 300 sweaty men wearing a belted tunic and carrying a bronze-tipped spear that doubles as your bedpost? Because if not, spoiler alert, there is no discreet. You lag behind, slightly pretending to tighten your sandal thong. A rookie move. You know someone's going to notice. The problem is you're losing the war before the battle even starts. You dip behind a scrubby olive tree, crouch low, and pray to every sky god, underworld god, and goat-headed fertility deity you've ever heard of. You can't even tell anymore whether what you're doing is more ritual or release. Mainstream historical fact: Bronze Age armies could march for 20 to 30 kilometers a day, especially when anticipating conflict. That's fine if you're healthy. If you're not, every step becomes an existential decision. You rejoin the column. A few smirks. One guy claps you on the shoulder a little too hard. Feeling better, he says. You give him a withering look and pretend you don't hear your stomach gurgling again, louder this time. It echoes slightly against your breastplate. Fantastic. What you wouldn't give for clean water. Not water that's been scooped from a frog-filled ditch, flavored faintly with whatever upstream village washed in it last. But in your water skin, that's exactly what you've got. And drinking it only makes things worse. You sip anyway. You kind of have to. Fringe tidbit: some Bronze Age cultures swore by copper amulets worn near the belly to ward off stomach ailments. You tried one once. It gave you a rash. The road narrows as you head toward the staging area. You're getting close. You can smell the campfires from the other army already. You pass half-buried fire pits from previous skirmishes, animal bones, and flies that refuse to be swatted. A few buzz around your face and land on your chest. You're too tired to care. And then there's the dust. It kicks up with every step. Fine and gritty, it sticks to your skin and creeps into your mouth, your eyes, well, let's just say there's no part of you untouched by it. And in your condition, it's not just annoying, it's risky. Because dust combined with sweat and soft bowels creates the ultimate recipe for disaster chafing. You try not to think about it, but every step is its own punishment now. The leather of your loincloth bunches in ways that feel criminal. The strap rubs. Your thighs are a battlefield before the real battle even starts. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age foot soldiers were truly full-time professionals or simply farmers called up when needed. Either way, the training manuals did not cover how to manage intestinal crises while armed and armored. You reach the end of the march. A clearing. Smoke curling lazily from nearby torches. Commanders conferring near a pile of spears. The enemy's not far, maybe a mile. You feel it in your gut, literally and figuratively. A scout approaches. Form up, he says. We move on the signal. You nod. Then clench. Then pray. Because the next part. Standing still. And that might just be worse than walking. You stand there, spear in one hand, shield in the other, trying to look stoic and fierce, while your insides feel like they've declared their own civil war. There's a long pause, just long enough for all your symptoms to regroup and double their assault. You shift your weight. Then again. Maybe if you move just right, you'll redistribute the agony. You do not. The phalanx is forming warriors shoulder to shoulder in tight lines, each man counting on the other to hold firm when the charge begins. Which is great in theory, until someone's about to explode from the waist down. You can't just step out now. That's how you get labeled weak, or worse, unclean. And if they think you're cursed, they won't let you near them again. A campfire tent or otherwise, and yet the cramps keep coming. You breathe through your nose. Deep, slow. You imagine you're a boulder, an immovable rock, a monument to intestinal willpower. Then someone bumps your side, and the movement nearly breaks the dam. Quirky Bronze Age tidbit: some warriors swore by clenched jaw rituals to ward off fear during combat. One line of thinking believed that if you held your teeth tight, you trapped your spirit in your body, preventing panic and soul loss mid-battle. You're doing something similar, except it's not your spirit you're trying to hold in. The battle horns sound in the distance. Not your sides. Theirs. It echoes across the valley like thunder filtered through a ram's horn. The front ranks start tightening their grips. Shields raised. Spears lowered. Everyone knows what's next. You will have questions about your life choices. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age warriors were expected to defecate before battle, as part of a cleansing ritual. Some texts hint at purification practices involving fire and water. Others suggest you simply did what you could, when you could. And right now, you can't. You glance at the man beside you. He looks serene. Probably hasn't had a bad gut in years. His tunic is perfectly tied. His sandals are clean. He's everything you're not. And yet he's about to march into the same chaos with you. You feel like saluting him for having a functioning digestive system. The commander shouts, "Advance." You take your first step. Oh no. The movement shakes something loose. You freeze for half a second trying to gauge whether the incident is imminent or just a false alarm. The answer is unclear. All you know is that clenching everything thighs, knees, hopes is your new religion. Then you walk again. 1 step, 2 steps. Each one feels like a gamble. You grip your shield tighter. It's heavy and rimmed with bronze with a dent in the corner from some previous battle you can't remember. But now, it's also your cover. Literally. If the worst happens, you can always pretend you fell face down, of course. Distraction tactics. The enemy lines come into view. You see helmets glinting in the sun, their spears at the ready. Your side raises a chant, something primal and meant to rattle bones. You try to join in. What comes out is a weak grunt, not exactly intimidating. The man ahead of you stumbles slightly, and you bump into him. Your core clenches reflexively, and this time, a small betrayal. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make your eyes widen and your pride shrivel like old figs. You consider stepping out, running to the bush, pretending you dropped your weapon. But it's too late. You're in it now. You march forward, a soldier fighting 2 battles, one with bronze and blood, the other with bacteria and betrayal. And honestly, the bacteria's winning. You're in formation now, shoulder to shoulder with your fellow warriors, and the air is thick with dust, sweat, and anticipation. The enemy line stands just across the clearing. Banners fluttering, war cries echoing. You're supposed to feel noble, electrified, heroic. Instead, you're sweating from places that should not be sweating. You shift your weight again, trying to ease the pressure building low in your gut. It's like a drum roll from the underworld, and you're pretty sure this crescendo isn't going to end with applause. The captain raises his arm. You grip your spear tighter. It's slick from your palm, not just with sweat, but with anxiety. The kind that makes your body go cold while your bowels stay hot. Then the arm drops. Your line surges forward. It's not a sprint, not yet. Just a lurch. Just enough to get the blood pumping, and yours, unfortunately, isn't the only thing moving. Your stomach lets out a noise that makes the guy next to you glance over. You pretend it was your sandal, or your shield, or a horse somewhere in the distance. But he knows. He knows. And worse, you know he knows. Your feet slap the ground in time with everyone else's. Dust kicks up in swirls. The sun is blinding, and the weight of your gear turns every step into a labor. Your belt digs into your side. Every time you lift your knees, your intestines threaten rebellion. You grit your teeth, not for bravery but for containment. The first volley of arrows whizzes overhead. One thunks into a shield. Another lodges itself in the dirt by your foot. You don't even flinch. You're too focused on not losing your dignity in front of 400 bronze-clad witnesses. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age armies had coordinated signals for battlefield retreats. Some evidence suggests horn calls or specific hand gestures. But in your case, there's only one internal signal. Evacuate. And it is screaming. Suddenly you're running. Your line hits the enemy's front with a thud of bodies, bronze, and barked curses. Spears jab. Shields crash. You parry automatically, the rhythm of combat overtaking you. Your training kicks in, but unfortunately so do your guts. You lunge, and something clenches, then slips. You don't want to know how bad. You can't know. All you can do is pray that your tunic's folds hide the disaster. Your opponent is a wiry man with sunburned skin and wild eyes. He swings his axe at you. You duck, twist, jab, forward. He stumbles back. You land a hit on his thigh, not deep, but enough to make him limp. He retreats. You should feel triumph, but all you feel is panic, and a growing warmth where no warmth should be. Fringe Bronze Age tip. Some warriors believed smearing animal fat on their thighs would ward off cramps in battle. Right now you're wishing for animal fat, or a time machine. You try to hold the line, but everything feels wrong. The sting, the shame, the sheer logistics of surviving this day while being this compromised. You back up a step, then another, just enough to give yourself space. You're not running. Not quite. But you are definitely edging toward the rear under the guise of shield repositioning. Someone behind you yells, "Hold formation." You nod, then hold everything. The skirmish is raging, and yet your biggest concern is whether anyone can smell you. You pray that the battlefield stench, sweat blood, metal fear is strong enough to mask your own personal catastrophe. The man next to you grunts and says, "Don't die like a goat." You don't respond. You just nod. You're already dying like a goat, a sick one. Then you hear laughter, not from the enemy, from your side. Someone's noticed. They've seen the back of your tunic. They've put two and two together. And while you're fighting for your life, they're laughing, like this is a tavern tale, waiting to happen. You want to disappear, fall into the earth, be swallowed whole by the gods of shame. But instead you just keep fighting, because what else is there? The fight drags on, but you're no longer tracking time by sword strikes or shouted commands. No, your internal clock is set to, oh no, not again. You've passed the point of caring how you look. At this stage, it's about survival, yours, and everyone else's nasal passages. Another warrior yells something triumphant as he fells an enemy with a brutal thrust. Cheers go up. You fake one yourself, forcing your mouth into a twisted grin, though your stomach clenches like a fist. It's not just cramps now. It's aftershocks. You're in the damage control phase of a disaster you can no longer deny. Your loincloth is soaked through. You know it. Everyone behind you probably knows it. Bronze armor doesn't absorb it, deflects, which means everything else doesn't. You take a deep breath and instantly regret it. In Bronze Age, cultures' bodily fluids were often seen as omens. Blood could be glorious. Tears could be sacred. But this was considered bad luck. Even worse, a cursed sign. A warning from the gods that something is deeply wrong. Warriors who soiled themselves might be shunned, ritually purified, or simply never mentioned again. You now fall into that last category. A priest near the rear line spots you. He raises an eyebrow, then starts mumbling. You can't hear him, but you know that chant. He's invoking divine protection from you. You've become a biohazard wrapped in shame and bronze. You're a walking omen of doom. You half expect the sky to split open and swallow you just to keep the gods from catching a whiff. Then comes the final insult. As the enemy retreats, a trampled patch of ground opens up and your foot slips. Down you go, face first. Your spear skitters away. Your helmet knocks sideways. And now you're not just the guy with the problem, you're the guy who fell in it. Literally and figuratively. Someone helps you up, kind of. They grab your shoulder, then quickly let go. You catch a glimpse of their curled lip before they turn away. You try to steady your breath, try to find your footing. But every movement reminds you of what you've become, a walking swamp in a tunic. You're less valiant warrior now, and more cautionary tale. And of course, the gods are watching. Back at camp, you'll need to purify yourself. That means smoke ash, maybe goat's blood, if you're lucky. If not, it means isolation for a few days, possibly exile from the barracks, and definitely years of mockery. Historians still argue whether battlefield omens influenced post-battle punishments. Some accounts suggest warriors were removed from priest-blessed units if they showed unclean signs. Others claim that bodily failure was shrugged off as human weakness. But when it's you, those academic debates don't mean squat. Because this isn't an argument, it's a punchline. Someone mutters under their breath. There he is, the brown banner. You pretend you didn't hear, but you did. And so did the guy next to him who chuckles. It's spreading now, just like the smell. Later, you'll be known not as Shield Brother, or Spearmaster, or Slayer of the Tall Mycenaean. You'll be known as the one who lost the war below the waist. That's your legacy now. You try to muster some dignity as you pick up your spear and shuffle back into line. Your legs stick, your back aches, your pride is 6 feet under, and the battle still isn't over. They send you to the healer's tent not out of mercy, but because no one wants you in theirs. You sit on a woven mat that smells like mold and regret stripped of your armor, and frankly your last remaining illusion of dignity. A young apprentice stares at your lower half wide-eyed, holding a pestle like it's going to save him. The healer finally enters an older woman with more wrinkles than patience, and sniffs once before nodding grimly. Camp sickness, she mutters, or the wrath of the grain god. Hard to say. She reaches for a bowl filled with something that looks like lumpy tar. This, she explains, is goat dung paste mixed with barley ash and a touch of salt. You try to back away, but she's already scooping. Rub it on the belly, counterclockwise, or clockwise. Depends who you ask. Fringe remedy, yes, but absolutely real. Animal dung, including from goats and crocodiles, was used in ancient medicinal practices across multiple cultures. Ingested applied, even smoked. Bronze Age pharmacy wasn't for the faint of heart, or the clean of stomach. You let her smear it on, flinching at the cold, gritty sensation. It smells like exactly what it is, but you're too tired to resist. And honestly, compared to how the rest of the day has gone, it barely ranks in your top 10 horrors. She hands you a cracked clay cup filled with a bitter, chalky liquid. Drink this, she commands. We'll stop the flow. You eye it suspiciously. Or kill you faster, she adds with a shrug. You drink and gag. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age healers were trained professionals or just older members of society with a strong stomach. Some burial sites show individuals interred with surgical tools and medicinal herbs. Others suggest healing was a mystical role given more to charm singers than actual doctors. Either way, you're now their canvas. Outside the tent, laughter drifts in. Did you hear what he did to his tunic? Someone jokes. He'll never get that bronze polished again. Another adds. You sigh, deeply, from a place between your ribs and your broken spirit. Your body still aches, but now it's less the cramping and more the raw humiliation. You're clean-ish, freshly swabbed, but you know that the stench lingers in other ways. In memory, in legend. Another warrior limps into the healer's tent, bleeding from the thigh, looking far more heroic. The healer rushes to him immediately. Battle wound, she coos. Not a gut leak, you wish the ground would just swallow you whole. Again, she eventually returns, handing you a talisman. For strength, she says. It's a piece of carved bone tied with old sinew. You nod grateful for anything at this point, even if it's just a placebo wearing a necklace. Stay here for the night, she instructs. Let your fluids stabilize. You settle onto the mat, pulling a coarse wool blanket over yourself. It's itchy and smells faintly of sheep and salt. But it's yours for now. A moment of rest, however small, feels like a blessing from the gods. You try to sleep, though the din of the camp continues. Wood crackles, meat sizzles, laughter, always the laughter flickers like firelight rising and falling around you. You dream of clean rivers, of fig trees heavy with fruit, of being remembered not for what your bowels did, but for how many enemies you struck down. But dreams don't change nicknames, and yours is probably already carved into someone's shield. Morning doesn't so much arrive as ooze in slowly, like the very sickness you've been battling. The camp stirs around you, snoring fades, fires rekindle, and the clank of armor returns like a headache you forgot you had. You peel back the rough wool blanket and sit up gingerly. Every movement reminds you of yesterday, as if you needed the reminder. The healer pokes her head in and sniffs the air. Better, she grunts. Still smells like guilt, though. You're not sure if she's joking. At this point, everything feels like a punchline you didn't write. You get dressed in fresh, well less filthy clothes. Your tunic's been replaced by one that's both scratchier and suspiciously stained in a few places. You try not to ask questions. You fasten your belt, wincing as it cinches your tender abdomen. Still gurgling, still fragile, but no longer on high alert. The captain sends for you, which is terrifying. You approach his tent like a condemned man. It flaps slightly in the morning breeze, sun glinting off the polished bronze of his helmet, which hangs beside the entry. You bow, then step inside. He looks up from a scroll. Doesn't say anything. Just stares. Feeling better? He asks, finally, tone dry as sand. You nod. Yes, sir. A pause. Good, he says. We need latrines dug on the southern edge of camp. You blink. Consider it a fitting assignment, he adds. Fringe tidbit. Some Bronze Age armies had designated dung men whose job it was to manage waste disposal and trench digging. Not exactly the stuff of epic poetry, but absolutely essential, especially after food poisoning spread through several armies like wildfire in recorded campaigns. You nod, trying to hide your disappointment. You'd hoped to redeem yourself, return to the line, maybe even re-earn your spear slot. Instead, you're on poop patrol. Again. This time just less personal. The day's labor is awful. Not just because of the stench or the blisters, or the fact that you're literally wading through other people's messes. No, what really burns is the snickering. You pass clusters of soldiers who nudge each other, whisper jokes, and occasionally call out delightful names like Sir Runs-a-Lot or Hero of the Hindquarters. You try to tune them out. One guy, a wiry archer with too many teeth, leans over and says, "You know you're going to be in songs someday. Bad ones. Rhyming ones." You smile politely, though you're plotting 3 different ways to sabotage his water skin. You dig, you haul, you stink, and yet somewhere between the 3rd trench and the 5th sarcastic salute, something shifts. The work becomes routine. Your stomach settles. The shame dulls into a manageable throb. You start to notice things again, the way the morning light hits the hills, how the birds haven't quite abandoned the battlefield yet, how the earth feels cool and solid beneath your sandals. Historians still argue whether ancient armies treated humiliation as punishment or merely as bonding. Maybe it's both. Maybe being laughed at by your peers means you're still part of something, even if it smells. And then just after dusk, something wild happens. Someone tosses you a roasted fig. No jokes, no comments, just a fig. A peace offering. You catch it confused, then eat it slowly. It's sweet. It's warm. It doesn't fight back in your gut. A miracle. Later, a warrior you recognize from the front line passes by. He pauses, then smirks. Better out than in, he mutters, then walks on. And you realize maybe the worst of it has passed. Maybe. The next morning arrives not with dread, but with something resembling stability. Your gut, once the traitorous beast within, now merely grumbles like a bored goat. Manageable, survivable. And in the world of Bronze Age soldiering, that's basically a medical miracle. You rise before the sun, the sky a dull purple, the camp still half asleep. You're no longer assigned to latrines, someone else has inherited that particular honor. But the jokes haven't stopped. They've just matured like bad cheese. Fewer snickers now, more raised eyebrows, more sly grins. The story has begun its transformation from disgrace to campfire legend. You're not just the punchline anymore, you're the source material. Today, you're put on patrol detail. No one says much. You walk the perimeter with a quiet archer who keeps glancing at you like you might suddenly erupt again. You don't blame him. Honestly, you keep glancing at yourself, too. As the sun rises, golden light hits the horizon, and for a moment, just a flicker, you feel human again. Less cursed. More humbled. One of the newer recruits jogs up, panting. "You're the one from the battle, right?" he asks, eyes wide. "The guy who kept fighting even after the, you-know thing. You blink, I guess." He grins. "They said you didn't fall back, that you held the line. That's wild. You're too stunned to speak. The tale has already begun mutating. You're not just the guy with diarrhea anymore. You're the guy who fought through it." Which, while technically true, ignores all the flailing, flinching, and crying on the inside you actually did. Historians still argue whether Bronze Age oral traditions embellished embarrassing battlefield moments into heroic parables. Some believe it was a survival mechanism turning shame into solidarity. Others think it was just good storytelling. Whatever the truth, you're now both cautionary tale and unlikely icon. You return to the mess circle that evening to find a space saved for you. A bowl of lentil stew still steaming. Someone's even left you extra bread. You sit cautious. No jokes, just quiet chewing and the occasional glance. Then someone mutters, "Better keep that bread away from him." Laughter erupts. You groan. That joke's older than my sandals. But you smile, because it's different now. You're not being shunned. You're being welcomed back. Your disgrace has been digested, repackaged, and recycled into shared mythology. By firelight, the stories begin again. Warriors boast exaggerate laugh too loud, and eventually someone starts your tale. Again. Remember the battle with the hill fighters, and how someone couldn't hold it in Chuckle's ripple, but still held the line someone else adds. A pause, then nods, and you sit there sipping your broth warm for the first time in days. Not just in the stomach, but in the bones. You're not just the guy who soiled himself in battle. You're the guy who didn't let it stop him, even if it really tried. So now just let the fires fade. Let the clanking of bronze and the snickering of soldiers drift into the background. You're safe now, not sprinting toward a battlefield, not cramping behind a shield, not struggling to hold your insides in while history watches. You're just lying still, wrapped in a blanket, breathing soft, even breaths as the night deepens around you. Let the image of those quiet stars over the Bronze Age hills flicker in your mind, like tiny flames far away. Imagine the soft wind on your skin, the cool earth beneath your tired limbs, and the low murmur of stories being told beside a fading fire. You're not the joke. You're the journey. The punchline became the proof you were there, and you got through it. So close your eyes, loosen everything, even the worry. You made it, warrior. Sweet dreams. Hey guys, tonight we travel back to the banks of the Nile, where the air is dry, the sandals are flat, and the ink smells faintly like crushed beetles and despair. You're a scribal apprentice in ancient Egypt, a job that sounds prestigious in theory, but feels more like an endurance sport in practice. The hours are brutal, the expectations are ridiculous, and you're about to learn that hieroglyphs don't write themselves. And yes, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before Ra even thinks about rising. The reed mats are cold. You roll out of bed in a half-conscious daze, and immediately step on a flint chip someone left behind. Welcome to the scribal dormitory, where luxury ends at having a thatched roof and a bucket that doesn't leak much. Breakfast. A handful of barley porridge that tastes like someone whispered grain over a bowl of sand. You choke it down, still blinking the sleep from your eyes as you shuffle out into the courtyard. The master scribe is already there, arms folded, eyes narrowed. He hasn't smiled in 8 years. You're not about to be the one to change that. Lesson 1 of the day, standing still while he rants. He doesn't speak loudly, which somehow makes it worse. He corrects your posture by yanking your shoulders backward. A scribe without backbone is no better than a dung beetle, he mutters. The others chuckle. You try not to look as humiliated as you feel. Ancient Egypt treated scribes with reverence. They were the literate elite guardians of legal records, temple scrolls, sacred texts, tax lists. But you're at the bottom of that sacred food chain. A mere apprentice expected to listen, obey, and stay awake, even when your body begs for sleep. You're marched off to practice your morning lines. This involves copying the phrase, "A wise scribe is a light to the land," over and over again on a broken potsherd. No papyrus for you yet, that stuff's expensive. You'll be stuck with pottery and your imagination for the foreseeable future. Your reed pen is homemade, carved with a dull knife and already fraying at the tip. The ink. Soot gum and water. If you're lucky. If you're unlucky, and let's be honest, you usually are, it's sticky and clumps like camel spit. Your handwriting looks like a beetle staggered across the page after 3 glasses of date wine. Mainstream historians agree that scribal apprenticeships could begin as young as 6 or 7, especially for boys from middle-class families hoping for a rise in status. But most didn't see results, let alone real responsibility, until their mid-20s. You right now are maybe 12, which means at least another decade of this charming misery. You sneak a glance at your friend beside you. His fingers are stained black from yesterday's ink spill, and there's still a smudge of soot on his cheek. He hasn't noticed. He's too focused on not messing up the curly tail of the owl glyph. Fringe tidbit owl hieroglyphs were believed to carry protective qualities. Ironic, given that the only thing protecting you right now is your ability to stay quiet and not mess up the spelling of Pharaoh. The sun finally peaks over the horizon, and your stomach groans. Too bad, because breakfast happened hours ago. You have another 4 hours before the break for midday prayers, and that beloved combo of bread onions and existential regret. You rub your eyes, which are already gritty. The ink fumes have started to give you a headache. Or maybe that's from being jabbed in the ribs with the back end of a reed pen. The master doesn't tolerate fidgeting. Again, he says, pointing to your crooked cartouche. The pharaoh is not a duck. You look down. The duck glyph is unfortunately not supposed to be there. You sigh, and wipe it off with a scrap of linen that used to be part of your tunic sleeve. Historians still argue whether scribes were chosen for talent, or simply endured long enough to make it through. But here's what no one debates. Apprentice life was not glamorous. It was messy, ink-stained, back-breaking work under the hot Egyptian sun, with a long way to go before anyone took you seriously. And your day has only just begun. You sit cross-legged in the courtyard now, your tunic already stiff with dust and sweat, and the fun part's about to begin tool-making. Because of course they don't just give you pens and ink. That would be far too merciful. No, here in scribal school you make your own writing gear, starting with a bundle of reeds, fresh from the Nile marshes, which smell like swamp breath and fish burps. You pick through the stalks, hunting for the straightest ones. Each has to be trimmed, hollowed, and shaved down to a fine point, with a chipped blade that wouldn't pass inspection at a toddler's craft table. One slip and congratulations, you've got a new scar to remember this lesson by. The ink's next. You scoop soot from the bottom of a charred cooking pot, mix it with water, and bind it with gum arabic, scraped from acacia trees. The gum smells sweet, almost pleasant, until it's mixed with that oily black powder and stored in a dried fig shell. Stir it too much, and it clumps. Stir too little, and it separates. Stir just right, and oh wait, it still runs, like overcooked porridge. Perfection. This whole process takes hours. By the time you're done, your hands look like you've been fondling coal. Your knees ache from kneeling on woven mats, and you've got a suspicious ink stain under your nose that you probably shouldn't lick. Too late. Mainstream historians widely agree that scribes often made their own tools, especially in training. Pens, ink, and palettes were considered part of a scribe's sacred kit, extensions of his identity. But the process of creating them. Let's just say no one romanticizes that bit. And while the elite scribes got to work with polished ebony palettes and perfectly cut pens, you're still scraping soot into a cracked oyster shell, muttering under your breath, because your last brush split into 3 uncooperative heads. Reduit, your overseer, says, sniffing your ink with visible disgust. This looks like what a donkey would excrete after eating charcoal. You open your mouth to defend yourself, then remember, silence is your best defense. Always. You trudge over to the clay water jar to start again. As you do, a beetle zips past your face and vanishes into a crack in the stone wall. You're halfway tempted to follow it. Surely beetle life is easier than this. Weird fact incoming. Some scribes believed certain insects were divine messengers from Thoth, the god of writing. You wonder if that beetle's trying to tell you something. Possibly run. The day drags. You finally manage to grind out a usable black ink and test it on a flake of limestone. It smears. You sigh, you adjust the gum ratio. It globs. You scream, but only internally. After all external screams get you extra chores, and you've already been assigned latrine wall scrubber duty for laughing during yesterday's poetry transcription. The poem in question compared the king's wisdom to a gazelle's nose. You stand by your decision. Nearby, another apprentice coughs as soot dust kicks up from his palate. His eyes water. Yours do too. The courtyard starts to feel more like a charcoal kiln than a classroom. Historians still argue whether the trial-by-fire approach to tool-making was more about humility or just laziness on the teacher's part. Was it educational character building? A secret hazing ritual passed down since the Old Kingdom. No one's sure. But your fingers are stained, your back is sore, and you've got papyrus dust in places it shouldn't be. You glance up and see the senior scribe gliding past in a pristine white robe, holding a gleaming ebony palette with 2 wells of shimmering ink, one black, one red. Red was for emphasis for titles for divine names. You've never touched red ink. That's graduation level stuff. You sigh, then turn back to your soot paste. It smells like sorrow. Lunch is still hours away. The heat is rising. Your pen splinters mid-carve and stabs you in the thumb. Perfect. A drop of blood falls on your sandstone sharpening slab. You pretend it's ink. That makes 2 of you bleeding into your craft. And still your reed pen isn't ready. You finally get a halfway decent reed pen fashioned, and somehow the ink no longer smells like burnt feet. Victory right, wrong. Now you have to actually write with it. And not just any writing hieratic script. Think of it as the ancient Egyptian version of cursive, except the letters look like drunk birds hopping across the page. It's elegant, yes, but also infuriating. Every squiggle matters. Every tail curve and stroke carries meaning. And your job. Reproduce it perfectly while hunched over a jagged slab of limestone that wobbles every time you breathe. You squat beside your assigned writing rock, a flat but slightly concave limestone flake, handed to you like a punishment wrapped in dust. There's a flickering bit of shade from the mud brick wall, and you cling to it like a dying man clings to hope. One toe out of the shadow, and the sun starts boiling your foot like an unseasoned stew. Your first assignment, copy the instructions of Ptah-hotep, a collection of ancient maxims written by a vizier thousands of years before you were born. It's supposed to teach you wisdom. Instead, it teaches you how to ruin your eyesight before age 16. The reeds squeak against the stone, your ink runs dry mid-character, and your handwriting looks like a drunk ibis fell asleep on a papyrus scroll. But you trudge on. Fun historical fact: apprentice scribes in ancient Egypt often practiced using scrap flakes of limestone and broken pottery called ostraca. Actual papyrus was expensive, too precious for beginners to waste. So you're stuck with uneven surfaces and textures that chew up your pen and make every line a gamble. The senior scribe glides past again, peering down at your work like it's a cursed amulet. Your loop on that sign is too narrow, he mutters. Are you trying to write enemy instead of noble? You blink. You look down. It's possible. The 2 words differ by 1 inflection, like dotting an I versus accidentally setting the scroll on fire. But you nod in shame, scrape the stone clean with a shard of flint, and start over. Again. Around you, the other apprentices murmur and scratch and sigh. One sneezes, smearing ink across an entire proverb. Another drops his palette, spilling his black sludge onto the sand, where it gets promptly trampled by a passing goat. The goat was not invited. And let's talk about your posture. You've been squatting or kneeling for hours. Your lower back has declared war on your kidneys. Your wrist cramps, your elbow twitches. Your entire left side is now a very specific flavor of sore, and you're convinced this is how you'll die. Half-finished sentence, bloodless fingers, and a stern old man glaring at your loop placement. Quirky tidbit: some ancient Egyptian scribes practiced on sand trays before moving to ink, literally drawing characters in sand with sticks like prehistoric etch-a-sketches. Too bad you got assigned to the advanced misery track. The worst part: silence. Total silence. No venting, no jokes, no sighs loud enough to be noticed. Speaking without permission means punishment, latrine duty, water hauling, or if you're really unlucky, copying texts from memory. And guess what? You don't have a memory. Not anymore. It was burned away by solar glare and ink fumes. Historians still argue whether hieratic was truly more efficient than its predecessor hieroglyphs. Your inner voice chimes helpfully. But they universally agree it wasn't any easier. And you agree with every bone in your body. At one point, you make the mistake of glancing up at the papyrus scroll from which you're copying. It's gorgeous, ancient, probably scribed by someone now buried with 6 gold amulets and an honorary statue. You'll be lucky if they bury you with a decent read. You grit your teeth and return to your task. By mid-afternoon, your fingers tremble from sheer repetition. You've copied the same phrase, "obey your master," as you would the sun, about 27 times. You no longer know what the words mean. They've dissolved into ink strokes and regret. But hey, one of your strokes almost looked intentional. Progress. By now, you've officially entered what scribes call the 1,000 mistakes phase. Every glyph you draw leads to another correction. Every correction leads to another lecture. And every lecture somehow loops back to the glory of serving Pharaoh. You're starting to think Pharaoh should come down here and copy these maxims himself just for perspective. Today your task is memorization, not just copying, internalizing. You sit under the same merciless sun hunched over your limestone shard while a supervisor recites lines from the Book of the Dead like it's the world's most passive-aggressive audiobook. You repeat after him, again and again and again, until the words congeal into a single throbbing headache behind your eyes. Mainstream historical fact literacy in ancient Egypt was rare. Probably less than 1% of the population could read or write. That's why scribes were so revered. You'd think that would mean better working conditions. Nope. It just means more people expecting you to write things perfectly on demand while silently judging your brush control. Your reed pen splits. Again. You sharpen it with your flint hands trembling. If you slice too deeply, the nib will snap off entirely, and you'll have to ask for a new one. And asking means explaining why you needed a new one, which always spirals into a micro-lecture about how real scribes could finish a scroll using just one reed and a drop of spit. You really start to miss the sand tray method. Then your stomach rumbles, not from hunger. Oh no, the gruel you ate this morning is still churning in there, like a mudslide trapped in a ceramic pot. This is fear rumbling. You're up next for dictation practice. One of the overseers reads out phrases, and you're supposed to jot them down without error from memory. One missed syllable, and you'll be rewriting the entire thing as homework, except the ancient Egyptian version of homework is scroll until your joints give out. You dip your pen into the inkstone. Your fingers are so calloused and raw that you don't even feel the rim scraping your skin anymore. The overseer starts, "The king of Upper and Lower Egypt." You begin writing, hand jittering slightly. "Son of Ra." Your reed pen catches in a groove on the stone. "Living forever, like the sun in the sky." You panic. Did he say sun or sky first, you guess? And then he stops, walks over, peers at your work, and silently shakes his head. Fun fringe tidbit. Some scribes in Egypt were believed to be spiritually protected by the god Thoth, patron of writing and knowledge. There's even graffiti from Deir el Medina that thanks Thoth for helping someone get through their copying drills. You try muttering a prayer to Thoth just in case, but all you get is a passing lizard and a slap on the back of the head for fidgeting. Your legs fall asleep again. You shift your weight, and the stone slab beneath you groans like it's had enough of your bad posture. Someone behind you coughs a dry papyrus dust sort of cough. You suppress your own cough because apparently coughing too much gets you assigned to reed-splitting duty, and you already failed that twice. Historians still argue whether apprentices were selected for intellect family status or just sheer availability. You remind yourself trying to console your aching spine. But one thing's certain, they weren't chosen for their ability to sit quietly for 12 hours straight. Your neighbor makes a mistake, and you hear the slap of a reed switch on bare skin. You glance sideways, just a flicker of movement, and spot a red welt forming on his shoulder. He doesn't cry out. He just bows his head and corrects the line. You don't look away fast enough. The overseer spots your wandering eyes. "Would you like to practice blindfolded?" he asks with a tight smile. You shake your head, furiously. "No, thank you." The rest of the afternoon becomes a blur of ink stains, sweaty knees, and words like integrity, obedience, and humility echoing through your skull. Your scroll looks like a deranged river map. Your fingers ache in 12 separate directions. And just when you think your pen can't possibly produce one more line, you're asked to recite what you just wrote, from memory. Your throat tightens as you try to recall even the first sentence. Your tongue feels like it's coated in clay. The overseer hovers arms crossed, giving off the same energy as a crocodile sunbathing just a little too close to the riverbank. You try to speak, but your voice croaks like a broken flute. You clear your throat and begin slowly, haltingly. Each word is a step across a tightrope made of fresh-cut papyrus. If you slip, there's no net, only a fresh pile of limestone, and the task to start over. Again, your mind starts to blend all the maxims into one endless moral casserole. The son who listens to his father is like a scribal goose in the marsh of wisdom, or something equally suspicious. You can't even tell anymore. The overseer nods slightly just once and walks away. You don't feel pride. You feel relief, which in this place might as well be joy. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Egyptian scribal education could last up to 12 years. 12. You're barely 2 years in, and already your dreams are haunted by hieratic curves and twisted ligatures. At night you dream of ink stains crawling up your arms like scarabs. And in the dream, your overseer is always just out of frame, whispering corrections. The lessons shift again. Now it's math. You didn't think it could get worse, but here you are, struggling to divide 1 by 7 using unit fractions. That's right. The Egyptians didn't use decimals or percentages. They broke everything down into unit fractions like manhath plus 1 quarter plus 1 under 28 25%. Probably. You try not to cry. Today's exercise involves calculating the area of a triangular granary, which is extra fun, considering no one in the room has ever seen a triangular granary. The equations are scratched into limestone shards with styluses made from burnt wood and broken dreams. And yes, if you mess up the answer, you're sent to fetch water from the well, 3 floors down and half a mile away. In August, with your mistake tablet tied around your neck like a badge of shame. Fringe tidbit. There's an ancient Egyptian school text where a teacher warns a student, "Don't be like the donkey who does not learn writing." Imagine being so bad at math that someone compares you to a stubborn farm animal. You're starting to think the donkey had it easier. Someone else is sent out to fill ink jars and doesn't return for hours. No one asks why. Either he ran away, or the ink-making room swallowed him whole again. You hope he's okay, but also sort of envy his escape. Your instructor drops a new challenge. Copy the instructions of Kajemni without missing a single determinative. You nod, like you understand, but you've barely slept, and your hands tremble from caffeine withdrawal. Okay, ancient honey water withdrawal, but same vibe. You settle into the rhythmic scritch-scritch of brush on papyrus. Your spine curves into a permanent question mark. Your neighbor to the left is muttering to himself, eyes wide, with a mix of panic and philosophy. You're not entirely sure he's still enrolled. And then, because this day wasn't cursed enough, the head scribe arrives. He's legendary, a master of calligraphy. His scrolls are displayed in temples. His gaze alone is said to sharpen dull reed pens. And now he's inspecting your work. He picks up your tablet. He raises an eyebrow. You brace for impact. Then he does the unthinkable. He nods, promising, he says, and walks away. You blink stunned. Did you just get complimented? Did that actually happen? Historians still argue whether that head scribe was Imhotep's cousin, or just someone with really good PR. Your brain helpfully adds, you don't care. You'll take the win. You earned it with every ink-smudged fingertip and every cramped syllable scratched into that stupid stone. It's nearly sunset. The overseers allow you to stand and stretch, but only for a few moments. You roll your neck and feel a crack that echoes all the way to your knees. The sun glows orange across the Nile in the distance, and for a second, just a second, you forget how much your back hurts. Then someone sneezes on your scroll, and the ink smears into an unreadable blotch. Of course, back to square one. The morning bells ring long before the sun does. You groggily sit up on your straw mat, rubbing your eyes with hands that still smell faintly of bitter ink and old papyrus. Your legs ache from squatting too long yesterday. Your shoulders feel like they've been used to haul pyramid blocks. You stare at your half-eaten loaf of barley bread, now home to a single bowled ant. It stares back. You eat it anyway. Protein is protein. Back in the scribal chamber, the air is already thick with dust ambition and body odor. You're halfway through reciting the hymn to Thoth when someone behind you lets out a dry cough that echoes like a curse. You all tense. If one student is sick, that's a shared plague waiting to happen. And here's the irony. The one time a scribe truly needs to write is when he's too ill to move. Yet if you show weakness, you're dismissed. Temporarily if you're lucky. Permanently if not. Scribes don't get sick, they just fade into footnotes. Mainstream fact, ancient scribes weren't just glorified note-takers. They were bureaucrats, tax collectors, and even religious officials. The pen was literal power in ancient Egypt. But to wield it, you first had to survive the learning. Today is errand day. That means you're running messages between senior scribes in the temple complex. Normally, this would be a chance to stretch your legs until you remember that each message is in formal hieratic written on crumbling ostraca and has to be delivered without a single smudge or wrinkle. You grip it like it's made of smoke. First stop, the House of Life. You duck past a gaggle of chanting priests, sidestep a goat foraging near the incense, and arrive at a high doorway flanked by sandstone lions. Inside, a high priest with the emotional warmth of a basalt statue snatches the ostracon from your hand. No thank you. No nod. Just a grunt. You think you're dismissed until he squints at your name mark and asks, "You the one who copied the hymn to Hapi last week?" You nod, trying not to visibly sweat. Good spacing, he mutters. Bad kerning. Fringe tidbit. The Egyptians didn't use spaces between words like we do. It was all context and flow. A badly placed glyph could literally change offering to Amun into punch Amun's goat. You're not joking. You've seen someone get walloped for that one. Back outside, the sun is brutal. The white robes help, but only a little. You regret not stealing your cousin's palm leaf fan. Your tongue sticks to the roof of your mouth and your sandals are filled with gravel and existential doubt. You run your second errand to the granary ledger scribe, who is less scribe and more accountant with anger issues. He examines your delivery, then makes you copy an entire list of grain measurements while standing. Your fingers are so cramped, you start to hallucinate tiny baboons dancing on your knuckles. Historians still argue whether scribal apprentices were formally apprenticed through family connections, or chosen for raw intellect. You grumble internally. But either way, nobody asked if they had decent posture. Later back at your bench, the instructor slams a new tablet down with unnecessary flair. It's a riddle, an actual logic puzzle wrapped in a religious parable. Apparently this is your reward for surviving errands. You squint. The problem involves a man carrying 7 loaves of bread to an oasis, but he's followed by jackals who each eat 1/3 of a loaf, and he meets a hungry ibis that speaks in rhyming couplets. You stare at it like it's a message from the gods, and not the helpful ones. You give up and copy it blindly. At least your handwriting is better than your reasoning. The sun lowers. The room's shadows stretch like lazy cats across the walls. You're tasked with cleaning the reed brushes, which have been soaked in black and red ink all day. Your hands are permanently dyed, a kind of dingy charcoal, your badge of honor, your curse, and possibly your next meal, if the barley rations don't improve. While rinsing the brushes, you overhear two instructors whispering. Did you hear that older apprentice got promoted? Transferred to the Delta archives. You nearly dropped the reed in shock. That guy. The one who once spilled beer on a funerary text. He's moving up. Apparently even mistakes don't doom you forever. And that sure gives you the tiniest spark of hope. Then your own instructor walks by, glances at your basin, and mutters you missed one. The moment vanishes like dew in the desert. You sigh, dip your arms back into the blackened water, and scrub harder. Evening brings a faint breeze off the Nile, carrying with it the comforting stench of fish guts and rotting reeds. You sit by the wall, nibbling a date pitiful enough to be classified as an ancient raisin. The others are scattered around comparing calluses and bragging about brush speed like it's a sport. You keep quiet. Today was exhausting. Your shoulders ache like you've been mistaken for a camel. But at least you're still here, still ink-stained, underfed, and marginally literate. Then, without warning, a clatter. One of the newer apprentices drops his reed brush and smudges his papyrus beyond saving. There's an awful silence, like the gods themselves have leaned in to listen. His face goes ghost white. And then the senior scribe steps forward. Not to yell, not to strike, just to sigh and say again. You blink. That's it, no beetle slap, no public shaming. Turns out the punishment isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just repetition, until your bones beg for mercy. You've now copied the instructions of Ptahhotep so many times you can quote it in your sleep. Do not be proud, because you are learned. Consult the ignorant and the wise. Mainstream fact, this ancient Egyptian wisdom text dating to around 2400 BCE was required reading for scribes and bureaucrats. A moral compass wrapped in poetry, reminding you that knowledge without humility is just noise. Still, you'd prefer if it came with snacks. Your instructor gives you a side glance and drops a slab of papyrus on your lap. Translate this, he says flatly. It's in Old Kingdom dialect, older than most of the walls in this place. You squint. It's about offerings to Bastet, the feline goddess of joy and vengeance, which seems oddly appropriate for your mood. But here's the kicker. You're not allowed to ask for help. This is a solo test. Miss a determinative misread a deity's name, and you'll offend both the gods and your greater. You settle in, knees cracking like old paint. The room is quiet, except for the occasional murmur brush against papyrus or snore from someone who definitely wasn't supposed to nap. The oil lamp beside you flickers, and your eyes sting, but you press on, building each word like a tiny pyramid of ink. Halfway through, your wrist starts twitching. The edges of the papyrus curl in the heat. Your breath smells like pickled onions and regret. Still, you keep going. Then, miracle of miracles, your instructor peers over your shoulder and gives the smallest of nods. Barely a blink. But it's something. Fringe tidbit. Ancient Egyptians believed that words held divine power, especially when written. Writing wasn't just communication. It was creation. Which means every hieroglyph you press into existence is technically a baby spell. No pressure. Later, you and the others line up to chant evening offerings. The smell of burning myrrh makes your nose itch. The rhythm of the prayers is hypnotic, and your stomach rumbles in time with the beat. A visiting temple scribe watches you all and murmurs something to your instructor. You catch your name in the hushed whisper. You're either about to be promoted or demoted to latrine duty. That night, just before you crawl into your reed mat bed, your instructor hands you a worn tablet. On it, scratched in careful lines, is a list of duties and locations, including scribe's helper inner chamber. That's one step above errand boy. It's minor, but it's something. You try not to smile too hard. Wouldn't want to appear arrogant. Historians still argue whether scribes lived primarily in dedicated quarters or rotated between temple court and village assignments, you think, as you fold the tablet into your satchel. But wherever we sleep, it smells like ink sweat and stress dreams. You lie back staring at the ceiling. You think about all the words you've carved today. The ones that slipped, the ones that landed perfectly, and the ones no one will ever notice. Tomorrow you'll write more, and maybe, just maybe, they'll matter. Morning fog rises like a ghost off the Nile. and even before your eyes open, you know today won't be gentle. Your back feels like you've been trampled by Anubis's pet donkey, and your dreams were once again filled with angry gods, correcting your penmanship. You haul yourself upright, scratch at the papyrus splinters stuck to your elbow, and shuffle toward the courtyard fountain. The water's freezing, but it's the only thing that feels remotely alive. You splash your face and stare at your reflection, eyes sunken ink under your nails, and that familiar expression of, "How am I not dead yet?" Then you hear it. Footsteps, lots of them. An overseer from the temple is making rounds evaluating apprentices for potential long-term placement. The rumors have been flying for weeks. One apprentice will be chosen to assist the vizier himself. Everyone stands up straighter. You try, but your spine makes a sound like a wooden door being kicked in. They inspect your work from the previous day. Scrolls are unrolled, ink strokes measured. Your fingers twitch behind your back. Sweat drips from your brow, and you try to blink without looking like a desert lizard mid-molt. Then they come to your scroll. The overseer raises an eyebrow. You mentally prepare yourself for exile, but instead he mutters a neutral acceptable. Your instructor beams, like he's trying not to beam. The other apprentices look at you with either quiet pride or seething envy. It's hard to tell with sunburnt teenagers in linen. Mainstream fact, the role of scribes was so revered in ancient Egypt that they were exempt from taxes and military service. They didn't just copy texts, they shaped royal decrees, maintained temple accounts, and literally kept history alive. No pressure or anything. That afternoon, you're sent to the archives. It's like being trusted with the pharaoh's sock drawer, except full of sacred texts instead of smelly linen. Scrolls line the walls in neat rows, each one a silent whisper from centuries past. You're tasked with organizing cross-referencing and not sneezing on anything. You carefully handle a scroll detailing lunar omens, its reeds crumbling at the edges like overcooked pita. It mentions a celestial alignment that supposedly caused a flood and a pharaoh's unexpected rash. Historians still argue whether these omen scrolls were truly believed or just useful political excuses. Either way, you labeled it unverified but dramatic in your head. A fringe tidbit buried in one document catches your eye, a mention of a rogue scribe who faked a famine report to get out of tax duty. It worked for 3 months before he was found copying love poems in a tavern. They don't mention his punishment, but based on current standards, he probably got demoted to cleaning crocodile pens. Late in the evening, you're handed your final assignment of the week, a dedication scroll for a tomb blessing. It's not glamorous, but it's public. Your work will be read aloud at the ceremony, which means your spelling better be flawless, or the spirit of the deceased may haunt you personally for eternity. You sit by the oil lamp and begin. Every glyph is a prayer, every curve a whisper to the gods. By now, your hands move with muscle memory, your body slipping into that trance-like rhythm of the practiced scribe. And despite everything, the bruises, the calluses, the unrelenting sunburns, you realize you're doing it. You're becoming a scribe. Maybe not a good one yet, but definitely one who hasn't died of papyrus cuts. You finish just as the moon rises over the wall. You roll up the scroll, seal it, and place it in the box. And for a second, just one, you feel proud. Not because it's perfect, but because it's yours. The day winds down. The torches flicker. The courtyard is finally quiet. You lie back on your mat, thinking about all the stories still waiting to be told. You don't speak them aloud. Scribes don't waste words. But in your head, a new sentence is already forming. And one day maybe someone will write about you. You lie still, now your body finally sinking into the reed mat as the distant hum of crickets echoes through the courtyard. The oil lamp burns low beside you, casting long shadows that sway like slow dancers across the limestone walls. Your breath begins to slow. The ink stains on your fingers remind you of the scrolls you've shaped, the knowledge you've preserved, the ancient voices you've given form. And though your world is built on silence, repetition, and aching joints, there's a quiet power in the work. The stars above blink gently. The Nile whispers softly in the distance, and the warm air finally begins to cool. Tomorrow will come, with more copying, more dust, more smudged hieroglyphs. But for now, you rest. You've earned this pause. You're not just a boy with a brush. You're a thread in a tapestry that stretches through time. Sweet dreams.